Hello. Today we're going through the entire tragedy of Hamlet, a story about revenge, madness, and the meaning of life. And as always, I have lots of visual scenes prepared for you, so stay tuned for that. The last time I read Hamlet, I read it for university, so that was a couple of years ago. And I don't remember it to be so incredibly sad. Honestly, the whole story is just so sad, and it's because Shakespeare had an amazing ability to portray characters who feel deeply human, yet at the same time, they're just too entangled in the events around them to do the right thing. And this is really the biggest point that I just can't stop thinking about, because I truly believe that no one in this play is actually evil. I think that the characters were just put in some very bad circumstances that led to the tragedy of Hamlet. Oh, and also in my previous videos, I forgot to tell you something, which is to subscribe to the channel. I don't know if this does anything to you, but yeah, you can do that. You can subscribe to the channel and I'm going to be very happy about this. But yeah, let's get into the story. So we begin in Denmark, specifically in Elsinore, and we are on a platform before the Elsinore castle. And here stands a soldier named Francisco, and we see that another soldier joins him. His name is Bernardo. They talk for a moment here, and we learn that Bernardo came here to relieve the other watchman, so Francisco, and as we learn that, suddenly two other guys enter the scene. One of them is Horatio, he is Hamlet's friend, and the other one is Marcellus, and he's an officer. Everyone greets each other here, and right after that Francisco leaves because his watch is over now, so he doesn't really want to stay any longer here. And right after that, the three men that are left on the platform begin to talk. And Horatio starts here by asking if the ghost has appeared again, as it turns out that both Marcellus and Bernardo have already seen the ghost twice during their watch. However, Horatio doesn't really believe them, which is why Marcellus brought him here tonight so that he can witness the ghost for himself. And so as Bernardo is now in the middle of telling the story of the haunting, suddenly the ghost appears before them, and Bernardo says that it looks exactly like the recently deceased King Hamlet, which was Hamlet's father. They have the same name. So the soldiers now urge Horatio to speak to the ghost because Horatio is a scholar, so he must know how to communicate with ghosts, right? Horatio agrees, and as a result, he turns to the ghost and he's like, "Who are you to usurp the body of the former king of Denmark?" To which the ghost doesn't really like that, and it gets pretty offended, and right after that it exits the scene. So now Bernardo teases Horatio for not believing in the ghost, and he asks him if his opinion has changed now. To which now the very scared and pale Horatio answers that the ghost wore the same armor that the former Danish king had when he fought against Poland and Norway. And Horatio also adds that these hauntings probably announce some sort of strange eruption to the state. And after that, Marcellus sits him down and asks to have a man-to-man conversation about why the army seems to prepare for something in haste. And so Horatio answers that the whispers go as follows. The former Danish king, Hamlet, the one that we saw as a ghost, was dared to a combat by the Norwegian king named Fortinbras. The Danish king agreed, he slayed the Norwegian king, and as a result he got a piece of the Norwegian land by some legal act that was sealed and signed and everything. But there's one person that's very unhappy about this, and this is a Norwegian king's son, also named Fortinbras. So we have the former Danish king Hamlet, his son Hamlet, and then the former Norwegian king Fortinbras and his son Fortinbras. Okay. And so it turns out that Fortinbras has gathered some vagabonds and now he wants to take back the land by force. And so as Horatio is explaining all of that, suddenly the ghost reappears and it tries to say something, but it's interrupted by a crowing rooster, and so as a result, it vanishes. Following that, the guys on the platform all agree that they have to inform Hamlet about all of this, about the ghost, and after that, everyone leaves. So now we change the location and we are inside a room of state in the castle. And we have a bunch of people here. We have King Claudius, Queen Gertrude, Prince Hamlet, Polonius, Laertes, his sister Ophelia, Cornelius, and Voltimand. And here King Claudius goes through a couple of cases. The first one is that everyone is very sad about the death of his brother, King Hamlet. And then the king explains that he married Queen Gertrude, the widow of the previous king, which gave him his current title of the King of Denmark. Following that, we go to the second case, which is that Claudius wrote a letter to the current King of Norway, who is very old and bedridden, and who is also the uncle of young Fortinbras, the guy that wants to take back the lands from Denmark. And Claudius explains that with the help of the letter, they want to inform the King of Norway about Fortinbras's plans, as he's likely just not aware of what's going on considering his poor health. And in the letter, they also try to convince him to stop his nephew from invading Denmark. Claudius then gives the letter to Cornelius and Voltimand and tells them to get it to the King of Norway. So they take it and they leave. And now we get to the next case where Laertes asks the king for permission to come back to France because his duty of being present during the coronation is done, and so he would really like to go back now. And to this, Claudius asks his father, Polonius, about his thoughts on the matter, and Polonius tells him to just let his son go, so the king agrees, and we go to the last case. So now the king starts to talk to Hamlet, and Hamlet is in a pretty weird position right now because just a month ago, the current king was his uncle, and right now he is his stepfather. So, as you might imagine, Hamlet is not very happy about this. And so now the king asks him, why is Hamlet so gloomy? And the queen also adds that Hamlet needs to let go of his father because the past is in the past and all that lives must die. And the queen also asks here why death seems to be so particular to Hamlet if it's so common. And in general, this discussion is basically like this, like the queen and the king are like, well, everyone is going to die, so why are you sad that your father died? Like, everyone is going to die. So, and to this, Hamlet starts to explain that it doesn't seem particular to him, but it rather is particular because there's a difference. And he then starts to explain that what seems is not the reality, because people can wear black clothes, they can cry their eyes out and have all the shows of grief, but at the same time they are just actions that a man might play. And he also says here that what's inside is very different from what's shown, and he actually feels the grief deep inside himself. And to this, the king says that even though what Hamlet feels is very commendable, at the same time he's just taking it too far, because this kind of grief is unmanly. And it goes against the nature because everyone has to die, so why grieve so much? And then Claudius asks Hamlet to think of him as of a father and to abandon his plans of going back to school at Wittenberg. Right after that, the queen asks him for the same thing, and as a result, Hamlet agrees to stay, and the king is very happy about this. And then everyone but Hamlet leaves, and Hamlet begins to have a monologue here. And so he laments here that God forbid people from ending their lives because he would really like to do this right now. And then he also gets very mad at his mother for being so fickle with her feelings, because just a month ago she was so in love with Hamlet's father, and now she married his brother, so that's kind of awkward. And Hamlet also has a problem with that because the brothers were not even similar. So, you know, because if Claudius was similar to Hamlet's father, then maybe that would be kind of explainable, but Claudius is actually very different. And so Hamlet is just very heartbroken over this whole situation that happened, his father dying and then his mother marrying his brother, which, yeah, I guess that's pretty normal. Like, I don't know, it's not unmanly to grieve your father. Like, come on, Jesus. Now, right after his monologue, Horatio, Marcellus, and Bernardo enter the scene, and Hamlet gets very happy when he sees Horatio because they are very close friends from Wittenberg. And Hamlet begins to question why did Horatio come here, to which Horatio says that, oh, he just wanted to see the king's funeral, nothing else. But Hamlet doesn't really believe him, and then Hamlet says a couple of sentences about his father, and he's like, my father, methinks I see my father. To which Horatio is like, where, my lord? Because he just saw the ghost. Hamlet answers, in my mind's eye, Horatio, like, what the fuck? Following that, Horatio tells Hamlet that he saw the ghost of the former king this night, and he also adds that the ghost was seen twice before by the watchman. And to this, Hamlet says that he has to see this ghost for himself, and he orders everyone to stay silent about this whole situation and to meet him upon the platform during the night. Now, change of the location, we are inside a room in Polonius's house. And here we have Laertes and his sister Ophelia. And Laertes begins by saying that his luggage is already on board the ship because he's going to France, and then he warns Ophelia about Hamlet's advances towards her, because Laertes senses that this is just not something that could be permanent. And that's because even if Hamlet loves her now, he's bound by his position in the social hierarchy. Oh, Jesus Christ, those words, those English words. Hierarchy. What is this word? And that's because even if Hamlet loves her now, he's still bound by his position in social hierarchy. So even if Hamlet tells her that he loves her, and even if he means it, she still shouldn't listen to his words and feelings, and she should rather care about what the main voice of Denmark would say. Which is pretty reasonable. I don't know what you think about this, but when I was reading Hamlet for this video, and you know, when I was reading this scene, because I was kind of reading it like, you know, first I was reading the Polish version of a scene, not like the whole piece, just like a scene, one scene in Polish, and then I was reading it in English, and then I was reading the summary to see if I got everything that I wanted to like understand from the play. And in the summary that I was reading, someone was commenting, like someone was interpreting that Ophelia's father and brother are trying to like control her life or something like that, and that they really don't care about her feelings. And I don't buy that interpretation. Like, I really don't buy it, because I feel like what Laertes is saying here is actually very good and correct. Like, isn't it? I don't know. Like, maybe I'm the one that's wrong here, but I really feel like he meant well. And yeah, and Ophelia is very young, Like, she should be kind of protected, I think. I don't know. And to this, Ophelia says that she will keep those lessons as a watchman to her heart. Which is a very pretty sentence, and I just wanted to read you that because it's pretty. And so after this part, Polonius comes in and he's surprised that Laertes is still here because the ship is ready to sail off. So he just gives him his blessings and then he tells him to go. Laertes does so, and right after he walks out, Polonius begins to talk with Ophelia about Hamlet. And he says that he recently got the information that Hamlet was given private time to Ophelia, and that she was very eager to give it to him. So Polonius asks her what's really between them, and she answers that Hamlet has made many offers of his affection. And to this, Polonius gets a bit irritated and says that she's very immature, and he asks her if she believes those offers. She says that she doesn't really know what to believe, and to this, Polonius tells her that she should consider herself a child if she believes those offers, which don't even have any credentials or anything. And Ophelia tries to defend herself a bit here. She says that Hamlet confessed his love to her in a very honorable fashion. But Polonius doesn't really buy that, and he warns her that men say those kind of things under the influence of emotions and they don't actually mean it. And then he also adds that Hamlet is just very young, so she shouldn't really believe his words because he doesn't really know what he's saying yet. And then at the end, Polonius says that he wishes for Ophelia to stop seeing Hamlet. She agrees, and they both leave. Now, change of the location, we are back on the platform outside the castle. And we have here Hamlet, Horatio, and Marcellus. And they say here that it's already past midnight, and soon after that, the ghost enters the scene. And Hamlet asks him about 10 different questions that all basically sum up to one big question, which is, why are you here? And to this, the ghost beckons Hamlet to come up to him, and both Horatio and Marcellus try to stop Hamlet from getting closer to the ghost, but Hamlet says that he does not fear because his life is not worth anything and his soul is immortal anyway. So he decides to go, but Horatio and Marcellus grab him and they keep him in place. But as they do so, Hamlet sees that the ghost is still waving at him, and so he breaks free, and now both Hamlet and the ghost leave the scene. And after that, Horatio and Marcellus decide to follow Hamlet. So now we change the location, but we are still on the platform, just a different part of it. And here enters Hamlet and the ghost, and they begin to talk because Hamlet says that he won't go any further unless the ghost explains himself. So the ghost now stops and he says that after Hamlet hears what he's about to hear, he will have to revenge him. Following that, the ghost admits that he in fact really is the ghost of Hamlet's father, and he tells him that he has to revenge his murder. To which Hamlet gets very surprised and he's like, well, what do you mean murder? And the ghost then explains that even though everyone thinks that he was killed by a serpent in the garden, the truth is that the serpent was actually the current king of Denmark, so his brother Claudius. And he goes further into that. He tells the whole story about how one time when he was sitting in the garden, suddenly his brother came in and he poured drops of poison into his ear, and that killed him. Then the ghost asks Hamlet to revenge him, but to also leave the queen in peace, and after that he leaves. And to all of this, Hamlet promises to revenge his father, and he gets very into it because he's like, yes, I'm going to wipe away every thought from my head that does not concern the revenge. And even though he is very excited right now, or like not excited, but like, you know, he has this passion to like revenge his father. At the same time, if you know Hamlet, then you know that it's not going to go like that, because Hamlet is a person that gets stuck in his head, and so he thinks so much that he does not really act that much. So now after that, Horatio and Marcellus enter the scene, and they are very curious about the news from the ghost. But Hamlet doesn't really want to tell them anything because he fears that they might reveal it to others, and he also makes them swear by the sword to never tell anyone about what they have seen tonight. Hamlet then adds that he might pretend to be a madman, and he makes them promise not to reveal that they know the reason behind his behavior. They promise, and everyone leaves. Now we change the location and we are back in a room in Polonius's house, and here enters Polonius and Reynaldo, who is Polonius's servant, and they are plotting here. Because Polonius gives Reynaldo a letter and some money, and he tells them to get those to Laertes, who is Polonius's son. But before that, Reynaldo has to find out how Laertes is actually doing and how his behavior has been like. And Polonius has a plan for that, and he tells us about it. And I'm going to play here a little bit, I guess, because I don't really want to bore you with the plain description, so yeah. And so Polonius says that the conversation should go like this, and pretend that I am Reynaldo and you are the person that Reynaldo is talking to. Yeah, you're totally right about this. By the way, do you know any Danish people that live in Paris? Oh, you do? I wonder where they get their money from, right? Like, oh, the one that you know gets it from his father? Wait, I think I actually know the guy. Isn't he like Laertes, Polonius' son? He is? No way. I know his whole family. Yeah, and in part him, but not that well. Isn't he like the guy that has a very fiery heart right now, if you know what I mean? Oh, you know, like the charms of youth, gaming, drinking, swearing, fencing, maybe. And so the plan is that if someone knows Laertes, then they would get into the details of those activities if they saw him engaged in those, because we don't know if Laertes is like this, but we want to find out. So after explaining the plan, Polonius gets Reynaldo to go. He does so, and right after that, Ophelia enters the scene. And she's very clearly unwell. And so Polonius asks her what happened, and Ophelia answers that while she was sitting in her room and she was enjoying her time, suddenly Hamlet came in without a hat on and with his clothes all unbuttoned and dirty. To this, Polonius asks if maybe Hamlet just went crazy because of his love for Ophelia, but she answers that she's not even sure about that because his behavior was just weird. And so it turns out that Hamlet went up to Ophelia, he grabbed her by the wrist, and then he went a couple of steps back and he put his other arm on his forehead. And so he basically was just like standing like this, basically. And he just stared at Ophelia for a couple of minutes like this. So yeah, that's not very normal, I guess. And after that, he just shook her arm and he left while staring at her through the whole walk across the room. And to this, Polonius says that he has to go to the king and tell him about this, because that for sure is a sign of a very deep love. And then Polonius asks Ophelia if maybe she said something hurtful to Hamlet to cause this reaction, but she says that no, not really. She just sent back all of the letters from him and forbid him from seeing her. So yeah, no, not at all. To this, Polonius concludes that it probably made Hamlet mad, but not mad as in like angry, but mad as in like crazy. And now Polonius regrets that he told Ophelia to break off this relationship, because he only did that because he thought that Hamlet was deceiving Ophelia, and now he sees that this was not really the case. Following that, we change the location and we are in a room in the castle. And we have here King Claudius, Queen Gertrude, Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern. And right at the start, the king welcomes those two guys, and he says that he invited them because of Hamlet's weird transformation. And it turns out that those guys are Hamlet's friends from school. Now the queen asks them to cheer Hamlet out of his melancholy, or at least figure out the reason for it. They both agree, and then the queen tells them to go and see her son immediately. They do so, and right after that, Polonius enters the scene. And he has some good news here, because first of all, the ambassadors from Norway came back, and second of all, Polonius believes that he found the reason for Hamlet's lunacy. And the king is, of course, very interested in this second information, but Polonius tells him to first listen to the ambassadors, and then they will talk about Hamlet after the dinner. The king agrees, and now the ambassadors enter the scene, and one of them, Voltimand, begins to speak. And it turns out that the king of Norway was not aware of his nephew's plans of invading Denmark, and while he was aware that Fortinbras was preparing the army, he thought that his plan was just to attack Poland. Great. So after that, the king of Norway called Fortinbras to his castle, and he made him promise that he will never attack Denmark. And so following that, the king decided that, well, since Fortinbras has recruited the army, they should probably do something with it. And so he decided to just attack Poland, because why not? Why do we always have to be invaded? Like, what's the deal here? And so because of all of this, now the Norwegian king asks the Danish king to allow the Norwegian army to go through Denmark in order to reach Poland. Claudius says that he will think about this in his free time, and he orders the ambassadors to leave. Now, right after they leave, Polonius begins to kind of beat around the bush when it comes to why Hamlet went crazy, and he finally reveals that Ophelia got letters from Hamlet. And so now I'm going to read you the letter.
Doubt thou the stars are fire, doubt that the sun doth move, doubt truth to be a liar, but never doubt I love. O dear Ophelia, I am ill at these numbers. I have not art to reckon my groans, but that I love thee best, O most best, believe it, adieu. Thine evermore, most dear lady, whilst this machine is to him, Hamlet.
So after Polonius reads those letters, he tells the rest of the story that after he found out about the romance, he told Ophelia to end it because he thought that nothing could possibly come out of it, because Hamlet has a higher social status. So, like, obviously nothing could be possible, even if the feelings were mutual. Ophelia did what was asked of her, and after that Hamlet went crazy. And after hearing all of this, the queen wonders if maybe this really can be the reason of Hamlet's madness. And so Polonius proposes a plan, of course, because Polonius always has a plan for everything. And so the plan goes as follows. While Hamlet is going to walk around the lobby as usual, Polonius is going to bring his daughter into the lobby, and then Polonius is going to hide somewhere with the queen and the king, and they're going to see how Hamlet reacts to Ophelia. And after Polonius explains his plan, Hamlet suddenly comes in and he's reading a book, and Polonius asks the queen and the king to exit the scene because he wants to talk with Hamlet himself. And so they do so, and right after that Polonius comes closer to Hamlet and he asks him, "Do you know me, my lord?" And Hamlet answers that, yeah, of course he knows him. He's a fishmonger. Polonius is not a fishmonger. And then after that, Hamlet warns him not to let Ophelia walk in the sun, because if she does so, then she will become pregnant. So they exchange a few words here, and after that Polonius leaves, and right after that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern enter the scene. Hamlet welcomes them with joy because they are friends, and he asks them what brings them to this prison. To which Guildenstern gets pretty surprised about this, and he's like, "What do you mean prison?" And Hamlet tells him that Denmark is a prison. And so Hamlet's friends don't really agree with him on this, and to this Hamlet says something interesting. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. To me, it is a prison. Then after that, Hamlet asks them to be real with him, and he asks why did they really come to Denmark. Rosencrantz answers that they just wanted to visit him, and to this Hamlet is like, "Are you sure you were not sent for?" And to this they admit that, well, yeah, indeed, they were sent for. As a result, Hamlet confesses that he's been feeling pretty low lately, and he also confesses that even though he seems normal in this conversation that they have right now, he's in fact deceiving both his mother and his uncle. Now, they talk for a little longer here, and Hamlet learns that the actors from the capital city are going to come with a play to the castle. And shortly after that, Polonius enters the scene and he says that the actors have arrived, and he praises them. He's like, "Oh, they're such wonderful actors. They know every play that you can possibly know, and they are great." To which Hamlet begins to talk about Jephthah, the biblical character that had to sacrifice his own daughter. And to this Hamlet is like, "Oh, Jephthah, you had such a wonderful treasure," meaning the daughter. And to this Polonius says on the side that, Hamlet is just always thinking about Ophelia. Now, 4 actors enter the scene, and Hamlet asks them for a sample of their skills, so they begin a play before him, and after a couple of minutes, Hamlet tells Polonius to take care of the actors, and as they all go away, Hamlet stops one of the actors and asks him if they are able to play the murder of Gonzago tonight. And Hamlet also adds that he wants them to insert a fragment into the play that he himself will write. The actor agrees, and then he leaves. Following that, Hamlet says goodbye to his friends. They leave, and as Hamlet is left alone, he begins to have a monologue. And he laments here that just a couple of minutes ago, the actor was able to force his soul into tears, a pale face, and a broken voice just in fiction of a play, while at the same time, Hamlet has a real motive to feel those kind of emotions, and he's just not able to feel them, and he doesn't really feel this passion that he needs in order to revenge his father. And then he begins to think, and he comes up with a plan, which is that he will tell the actors to play something similar to the murder of his father. And the goal here is to see the reaction of the king, because right now, Hamlet is not very sure about the ghost. He thinks that maybe the ghost was just the devil that tried to mess with him because of his melancholic state. So he wants to see if what the ghost said was true. So now we change the location again. We are in a room in the castle, and we have here King Claudius, Queen Gertrude, Ophelia, Polonius, Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern. And we begin with the king asking about Hamlet, to which Rosencrantz says that even though he admitted to his low mood, at the same time he didn't really want to go into the details, and so they don't really know what caused this melancholy. To which the king asks if they had offered Hamlet any sort of entertainment, and Rosencrantz tells him about the actors that came to the castle, and he says that Hamlet seemed to enjoy the play that they performed because he requested them to perform again tonight. And to this, Polonius also adds that Hamlet requested the king to be present during the play. Now, Claudius accepts the invitation. He then tells Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to keep Hamlet entertained, and then they both leave. And as soon as they leave, Claudius also tells the queen to go away because he wants to realize the plan from before that's going to let them figure out if Hamlet has feelings for Ophelia. To this, the queen wishes that Hamlet's melancholy is really caused by this infatuation, and then she leaves. Next, Polonius and Claudius hide away, and Ophelia starts to read a book as Hamlet enters the scene. And here we have a big monologue that begins with the famous words, "To be or not to be, that is the question." And in the monologue, Hamlet goes through a couple of points. First, he wonders if it's better to accept the misfortunes that life throws at him, or is it better to actually face them and by opposing, end them? Which probably ties to the whole revenge thing, because he's like, okay, on one hand, I can just accept this whole situation and move on with my life. On the other hand, I can actually revenge my father, so, you know, he doesn't really know what to do. He doesn't know what to choose. In his second point, he concludes that if we, humans, were aware that once we die, we end our suffering and all of the chaotic emotions that we have inside, then death would be our biggest goal in life. Then Hamlet concludes that people don't end their lives only because we don't know what's on the other side, because if we knew that, then we would probably end our lives and we wouldn't be such cowards. That's his words. And in general, Hamlet just doesn't understand why would someone be willing to live on this earth if there's so much suffering around. Then in his last point, he concludes that people are cowards because they don't take their own lives. And he thinks that because he's like, if you really think about life, then this is really the only logical option, so you know, he finds the reason that we are just cowards and this is why we live on this earth. And so now, after all of this, Hamlet notices Ophelia and they begin to talk. And I'm going to give you a little play again because I tried to summarize this dialogue and I didn't really like how it sounded, so yeah. Okay, so listen. When I'm here, I'm Hamlet, okay? And when I'm here, I'm Ophelia, okay? Oh, I still have some trinkets from you and I would like to just give them back because we're not seeing each other anymore, so, you know. What are you talking about? I never gave you anything. My lord, you know right well you did. Take them back, please. I did love you once. Well, yes, you made me believe so. Well, you should not have believed me. I loved you not. Okay, I guess I was deceived then. You know what? Go to a nunnery. And if you really want to marry, then marry a fool, because wise men know well enough what monsters you make of them. Oh, and I know about the paintings on your face, and God has given you one face, and you make yourself another. And now I'm angry, so goodbye to you. And so after that, Hamlet leaves, and Ophelia is devastated by seeing him in this state. Which to me, it's kind of interesting because I feel like she has to feel some type of love or affection towards Hamlet because he told her a bunch of hurtful things, and instead of being sad or angry at him, she's just worried because she knows that this is not the real Hamlet. She knows that something had to go wrong because like Hamlet wouldn't behave like that. So yeah, so I feel like she really has to feel like, I don't know if love, but definitely affection towards him. Okay, so going back to the story, Polonius and Claudius come out of the hiding, and the king says that, well, this is not really how love looks like, and so he decides that he needs to send Hamlet to England because maybe he will come back to himself there. And to this, Polonius is like, okay, this is a nice idea, but maybe we should send Hamlet to the queen first, and she can talk to him honestly about his state of mind and everything, about his concerns. And if that fails, then yeah, let's send him to England. So the king agrees to that, and the scene ends here. Next, we find ourselves inside a hall in the castle, and Hamlet enters here with the actors. And here Hamlet begins to explain how the actors should play on the stage, and I find it kind of interesting because I feel like it's more like Shakespeare speaking and not Hamlet, because it doesn't really fit Hamlet's character, like speaking about how the actors should play, but it really fits Shakespeare. So I don't know about this. Maybe I'm mistaken here because I have literally no idea, but as I was reading it, it kind of got to me that the advices that Hamlet gives are very genuine. They're not very personal to Hamlet or to the play. They're like actual genuine advices for the actors. So I don't know, but it feels like this is actually Shakespeare speaking. I have no idea if that's true, but it felt like it. But yeah, let's go back to the story. So the actors now leave, and Polonius, Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern enter the scene. And Polonius says here that the king and the queen agreed to come to the play, and after that Hamlet tells them to hurry up the actors, so they all leave. And now Horatio comes in, and Hamlet tells him that in the play there's going to be a scene that's going to be very similar to what the ghost told him about the previous king's death. And then Hamlet tells Horatio to pay a very close attention to the king's face during the play, because if his face does not show guilt, then that would mean that the ghost was just a lying evil spirit. So now we hear trumpets, and after that everyone enters. We have here King Claudius, Queen Gertrude, Polonius, Ophelia, Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern. Then they all sit down at their seats, and the queen asks Hamlet to sit next to her, but he's like, no, I have a place that's far more interesting. And he lies down at Ophelia's feet. And Ophelia notices that Hamlet is in a very good mood, to which he says that, well, what should a man do but be happy? And he points out that his mother is very happy, even though his father died 2 hours ago. Ophelia corrects him here that it was actually 2 months ago, and to this he sarcastically adds, "Oh heavens, died 2 months ago and not forgotten yet? Then there's hope a great man's memory may outlive his life half a year." Now, following that, the play begins, and I'm going to read you what's going on here.
Enter a king and a queen, very lovingly, the queen embracing him and he her. She kneels and makes show of protestation unto him. He takes her up and declines his head upon her neck, lays him down upon a bank of flowers. She, seeing him sleep, leaves him. Anon comes in a fellow, takes off his crown, kisses it, and pours poison in the king's ears, and exit. The queen returns, finds the king dead, and makes passionate action. The poisoner, with some 2 or 3 mutes, comes in again, seeming to lament with her. The dead body is carried away. The poisoner woos the queen with gifts. She seems loath and unwilling a while, but in the end accepts his love.
So now Hamlet asks his mother if she's enjoying the play, and she's not very thrilled about it. Next, Lucien, which is the king's nephew, enters the scene, and he pours poison into the sleeping king's ear. To this, Claudius gets up, the queen asks him what's the matter, and Polonius yells for the actors to stop the play. Then Claudius orders everyone to leave, and we are left here with only Hamlet and Horatio. They start to talk about the king's reaction, and well, it is pretty obvious that the ghost didn't lie. Then Rosencrantz and Guildenstern enter the scene and they say that the king feels very ill from anger. Then they also add that the queen has sent them to tell Hamlet that she wants to see him in her room. And at first Hamlet is like, well, I've gone mad, so I can't really give you a clear answer. But then he agrees, and as he's about to send them off, suddenly Rosencrantz tells them that there was a time when they were friends. And to this, Hamlet takes Guildenstern to the side and he gives him a pipe and he tells him to play it, to which Guildenstern is like, I can't really do that. And to this, Hamlet is like, oh, that's interesting, because you refuse to play an instrument that was specifically made to be played, while at the same time you think that you can play me even though you don't know every mechanism that lies inside me. Then suddenly Polonius enters the scene and he repeats that the queen wants to see Hamlet as soon as possible. Hamlet says that he will be there in a second, so Polonius leaves, and then Hamlet orders his friends to leave. They do so, and we get a short monologue from Hamlet. He says here that it's a real shame that his mother wants to see him now, just as he finally got himself together in order to revenge his father. And he also says here, let me be cruel, not unnatural. I will speak daggers to her, but use none. Following that, we change the location to a room in the castle, and we have here King Claudius, Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern. And we begin the scene with the king saying that it's not safe to let Hamlet's madness get even worse, so because of that, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern have to take Hamlet to England as soon as possible. They agree, and the king tells them to get ready, so they leave. And right after that, Polonius enters the room and he says that Hamlet is going to be in his mother's chamber in a minute. And so because of that, Polonius suggests that he's going to hide somewhere and listen to the whole conversation, because he thinks that the queen can't be trusted because she's his mother, so like, you know. The king thanks him for this idea, and after that Polonius leaves. Now, as the king is left alone, he begins to have a monologue about how the filth of his crime stinks to the heavens. And he admits here that he killed his brother, and then he says that he's not even able to pray because of the guilt that he feels. But then he starts to wonder, because like, shouldn't mercy be given to everyone? But then he's also like, no, but I still have everything that I got from the crime, because I have the crown, I have my own ambition, and I have my queen, so, you know. But then he finally decides to pray, and he begs the angels to help him, and then he kneels down. And now Hamlet enters, and he's like, well, great, now I can't kill him, because he's going to go to heaven. So that wouldn't even be revenge. And so because of that, he decides that he's going to kill Claudius only when he's going to be like in the middle of sin. And so after that, Hamlet leaves and we change the location. We are inside Queen's chamber, and we have here Queen Gertrude and Polonius. And we begin with Polonius telling the queen to be very strict with Hamlet, and after that Polonius hides behind an array, which is like a screen of tapestry. Hamlet enters the room and the queen tells him that he has offended his father, to which Hamlet answers that she has offended his father, to which the queen says that what he's saying doesn't really make any sense, and after that Hamlet says that he would really like her to be his mother and not the wife of his uncle. To this, Gertrude is like, okay, I'm just going to get someone else here because I'm not able to talk to you. And Hamlet is like, no, 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 no. You are not going anywhere until I place a mirror in front of you and show you your own reflection. And she gets very scared because of that, and she yells for help because she thinks that Hamlet is going to murder her. And right after that, we hear a scream behind the array that also yells for help. And to this, Hamlet draws a sword and he pushes it through the array. And because of that, Polonius yells that he's been slain and he dies. To which Hamlet now starts arguing with his mother because she tells him, "Oh, what a rash and bloody deed is this?" To which Hamlet answers, "A bloody deed, almost as bad as kill a king and marry with his brother." And she doesn't really know what he's talking about, and so Hamlet now points to two portraits on the wall, one of his father and one of his uncle. And first he tells the queen to look at the portrait of his father and see how amazing he was, a true ideal of a man. And then he points to the portrait of his uncle and he's like, "Do you even have eyes? What is this?" And then Hamlet begins to wonder, kind of more to himself than to her, what even made her marry his uncle. And after that, he goes to like a big monologue about Gertrude losing her senses and being blind to the reality. And to this, the queen asks him to stop, and she says,
"O Hamlet, speak no more. Thou turnest mine eyes into my very soul, and there I see such black and grained spots as will not leave their tinct. Oh, speak to me no more. These words like daggers enter in mine ears. No more, sweet Hamlet."
Following that, the ghost of Hamlet's father enters the scene and Hamlet begins to talk to it, to which Gertrude yells that he's gone mad, because it turns out that she's not able to see the ghost. And so the ghost is just like, "Oh, I just came here to remind you about the revenge. Yeah, but by the way, why is Gertrude in such a state?" And so after the ghost says that, he asks Hamlet to step between Gertrude and her fighting soul. And so to this, after everything that happened thus far, Hamlet just asks his mother, "How is it with you, lady?" To which now she accuses him of going mad and talking to the empty space, and he's like, "No, I'm talking to him." And so Gertrude looks there and she's like, "There's no one here." So Hamlet asks her if she heard anything, and she's like, "No, I only hear you and myself, no one else." And then Hamlet points again and he's like, "Look, my father." And the ghost now leaves the scene and Gertrude concludes that her son is mad. And to all of this, Hamlet tells her not to cope with this situation by thinking that it was Hamlet's madness and not her own sin that spoke tonight. And he also advises her to confess herself to heaven. And to this, Gertrude says that he broke her heart in two pieces, and Hamlet points to Polonius's body and he says that he will bury him and give him a very nice funeral because he actually regrets that he killed him. And then Hamlet says that he has to go to England where his school friends are going to watch over him, and he adds that he knows that they're going to act to his disadvantage, so he wants to make them regret it. And now after all of this, Hamlet drags Polonius's body out of the room and he says goodbye to his mother. Following that, we are in the same room, but now we have different people here. We have Queen Gertrude, Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern. And after a second, King Claudius enters the room and he asks Gertrude what's going on with Hamlet. To which she answers that he's gone mad as the sea and the wind when both contend with which is the mightier, which is just another pretty sentence. She also says that Hamlet killed Polonius And to this, Claudius concludes that Hamlet's liberty is full of threats to everyone, and he regrets that he gave him even more time and freedom, but he says that he just loved him so much that he was not able to do anything radical to him. Then he asks where did Hamlet go, and the queen answers that he went away to bury Polonius's body, and to this, Claudius decides that they need to immediately make Hamlet board the ship and then do everything they can to find an excuse and save him from being guilty of murder. And then Claudius asks Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to find Hamlet, speak to him, and then get Polonius's body to the chapel. So they both leave, and after that Claudius tells Gertrude that they need to get their wisest friends and they need to talk to them in order to save their face. Following that, we enter another room in the castle and we have Hamlet here. He says here that Polonius's body is safely hidden, and then right after that, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern enter the scene and they ask about the body. But Hamlet's answer is not very direct, and he asks, besides, to be demanded of a sponge, what replication should be made by the son of a king? And to this, Rosencrantz is like, take me for a sponge, my lord? And Hamlet explains that they are both like a sponge that the king will squeeze out when he no longer needs them, implying that Hamlet knows that his friends are in the service of Claudius. So now we are in another room in the castle and we have King Claudius and a couple of men. Claudius explains here the murder of Polonius, and he says that Hamlet went crazy and he has to be stopped now. Then Rosencrantz enters and he says that they couldn't find the body, but they got Hamlet. And so Claudius is like, okay, bring him here. And after that, Guildenstern enters with Hamlet. And so as soon as Hamlet shows up, Claudius asks him where's Polonius's body, and to this Hamlet answers that he's at supper. And to this Claudius is like, at supper? What do you mean? Where? And Hamlet answers,
not where he eats, but where he is eaten. A certain convocation of politic worms are eaten at him. Your worm is your only emperor for diet. We fat all creatures else to fat us, and we fat ourselves for maggots. Your fat king and your lean beggar is but variable service. 2 dishes, but to 1 table. That's the end.
And after that, the king asks him again about Polonius's body, to which Hamlet answers that if they won't find him within a month, then they will feel his smell as they go up the stairs into the lobby. So now the king tells a couple of people to go there, they leave, and after that, he tells Hamlet that because of everything that happened tonight, Hamlet has to go to England. And Hamlet expected that, so because of that he just accepts the information and then he says goodbye and he leaves. And right after that the king tells Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to go follow Hamlet and get him to the ship as soon as possible. They leave, and after that we get a short monologue by the king where he kind of talks towards England and he hopes that according to his letters, England will fulfill the favor and Hamlet will die. Following that, we change the location and we are in a plane in Denmark. We have here Fortinbras, a captain, and a couple of soldiers. And here Fortinbras tells the captain to go to the King of Denmark and ask him about the permission to go through Denmark in order to reach Poland. Don't do that. The captain agrees and Fortinbras disappears with the soldiers, and right after that Hamlet enters with Guildenstern and Rosencrantz. And so Hamlet asks a couple of questions, thanks to which he learns that the Norwegian army is marching towards Poland in order to conquer some small and useless lands. And I don't know what he's really talking about because we don't have those. After that, the captain leaves and Hamlet asks Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to go a little before him, and so they do that, and thanks to that they both disappear now. And now we have a short monologue by Hamlet in which he wonders about the meaning of life, and he also laments that there's so much pain and suffering in the world and he's not able to do anything about it. Following that, we are back in the castle in Denmark, precisely in a room, and we have here Queen Gertrude and Horatio. And the queen begins here with, "I will not speak with her," to which Horatio explains that Ophelia is in a very bad state. She constantly talks about her father, and on top of that, she's very sensitive and her speech is deprived of logic. And so now, after hearing all of this, the queen finally decides to see Ophelia, and right after that she enters the scene. And the queen asks Ophelia what does she want, to which Ophelia begins to sing about her lover who is dead and gone. And as she's singing, suddenly the king comes in and he waits for Ophelia to finish her song, and after that he asks her how she's doing. To which she answers that everything is good, but then she starts to speak in metaphors, and so the king interprets that as Ophelia really missing her father. And then Ophelia starts to tell another story about the lovers who met in the cottage, from which the girl emerged transformed. So she lost her virginity. And the man from the story promised to marry her, but now, after he got what he wanted, he decided not to do it, and he just told her that she should have respected herself more. And now, after all of this, the king asks how long has she been in this state, to which she just continues, and she says that she hopes that all will be well. And then she leaves, and the king tells Horatio to go after her. He does so, and after that the king laments that everything is just getting worse and worse. And right after that they hear a big noise outside, and then a gentleman comes in and he says that the king has to save himself because Laertes is coming, and this is Polonius's son, Ophelia's brother. And it turns out that Laertes is now at the head of a riot and people want him to become a king. And Claudius doesn't even have the time to think it through, because right after that Laertes comes in with a bunch of Danish people, but he tells them to stay outside, so they do so and they guard the door. Then Laertes demands that the king shall give him back his father, but the king admits that Polonius is dead, and right after that the queen also adds that this is not the king's fault. Then Laertes asks how did his father die, and he also adds here that he doesn't want to hurt his father's friends, he only wants to take revenge on his father's enemies. To which the king says that now Laertes speaks like a good child and a true gentleman, and he also explains that he's not guilty of Polonius's death and that he's also very hurt by it. Then Ophelia comes in and she's dressed in flowers and she begins to sing and talk things that don't really make any sense. And she has like a bunch of flowers and herbs in her hand, and she just goes around and she gives them to the queen, the king, and Laertes, and she's singing about her dead father as she does so, and after that she leaves. So now Laertes figures out that his sister has gone mad, and to this Claudius says that he should get his most trusted friends and with their help figure out who's guilty of Polonius's murder. And if it turns out that Claudius is guilty, then he will give him everything. He will give him the crown, Denmark, and even his own life. Laertes agrees, and after that we end this scene. Following that, we enter another room in the castle, and we have here Horatio and his servant. And Horatio asks the servant about the people that want to see him, to which the servant answers that those are sailors that have some letters for him. And so Horatio agrees to see them. The sailors come in and they give him a letter from Hamlet. And here we learn that as they were sailing the seas, suddenly they were attacked by pirates. And so they began to fight with them, and during the fight Hamlet jumped onto their ship, and soon after that they sailed off. So Hamlet became their prisoner, while Rosencrantz and Guildenstern just continue the journey to England. And in the letter, Hamlet asks Horatio to take the sailors to the king as soon as possible, because they also have a letter for the king. And after that, they're going to take Horatio to Hamlet. So Horatio gets pretty excited to see Hamlet, and so he takes the sailors to the king, and then we change the location. So we are in another room in the castle, and here enters King Claudius and Laertes. And the king tells Laertes here that now he has to be on his side after he learned that the man that killed Polonius is the same man that wanted to kill Claudius. To which Laertes says that, yeah, while it's true, at the same time, couldn't you stop Hamlet from doing this? To which the king explains that he actually had two reasons for not stopping Hamlet. The first one is that Gertrude is very attached to her son, and Claudius is very attached to Gertrude, so you know. And the second one is that people love Hamlet so much that they would hate Claudius for punishing him. So now Laertes says that he wants to seek revenge, and Claudius tells him that he will help him because he loved Polonius and he also loves Laertes very much. Then suddenly a messenger comes in and he gives the king two letters from Hamlet, one for the king and one for the queen. Then the messenger leaves, and after that the king reads the letter, from which he finds out that Hamlet was taken to Denmark, and tomorrow he will beg the king to see him in order to tell him everything that happened. To which Laertes gets very happy because he's going to be able to revenge his father, and to this Claudius says that he's willing to help him because it turns out that he knows how to kill Hamlet discreetly so that even Gertrude won't figure out what truly happened. So now the king explains that there was always one thing about Laertes that Hamlet was very jealous of, and that was Laertes' skill in the rapier combat. So now Claudius concludes that Hamlet will for sure want to fight in order to see who's better, and Laertes agrees to that, and he says that he will also smear his blade with poison from which the opponent will die even with a minor scratch. Claudius really likes this idea, and then he figures out that they also need a backup plan, so he thinks for a moment, and after that he comes up with an idea, which is to get Hamlet very tired with the rapier combat and then give him a drink full of poison. Then as he says this, suddenly the queen comes in and she tells Laertes that his sister has drowned. And she tells the whole story here because it turns out that as Ophelia was sitting under the willow tree and she was making garlands with lots of different flowers, suddenly she got up because she wanted to hang one of the garlands on the tree, but she was not careful enough, so as she was walking, suddenly the branch broke and she fell straight into the water. And for a couple of minutes her dress kept her afloat, but she was just back to singing her songs, and so after some time she drowned. Now Laertes is just devastated by what he hears, and soon after he leaves. And to this Claudius tells the queen that they should go, and he's such a piece of shit because he also adds how much I had to do to calm his rage. Which, no, that's not what happened. Following that, we finally get out of the castle and we are now in the churchyard. And here we have two gravediggers that argue with each other because the first one is like, how is she getting buried the Christian way if she took her own life? And to this the second one answers that, well, those are the orders, and besides there was a person that confirmed that she did not end her life. To which the first one gets mad and he's like, well, that's not really true, and if she came from a lower class, then she wouldn't have a Christian burial. Then the first gravedigger tells the second one to go and get him some alcohol. He does so, and after that, Hamlet and Horatio enter the scene. The gravedigger now digs and sings, and suddenly he throws up a skull, and Hamlet gets very interested in that. And he gets very deep about thinking about the skull because he's like, oh, I wonder who had this skull like inside, and maybe it was an honorable man and now his bones are just thrown around here. And then the gravedigger throws up another skull, and to this Hamlet asks him, whose grave is this? And he learns that a woman is getting buried today, but he doesn't know that this is Ophelia yet. The gravedigger then says that he's been working here since the young Hamlet was born, the same one that has gone mad and was sent to England. And then after that, the gravedigger gives Hamlet another skull, and he says that this one belonged to Yorick, who was King's jester. And Hamlet gets pretty emotional here. He takes the skull into his hand and he says that he actually knew this jester. So Hamlet stands like this for a while, remembering Yorick when he was still alive, and then after that he puts down the skull. And now Hamlet and Horatio hear a procession coming close, so they hide and they see a bunch of people coming in. There's a priest, the corpse of Ophelia, Laertes, King Claudius, and Queen Gertrude. They come closer and the priest says that they are only able to bury her right now because if they did anything else, then they would profane the service of the dead. To which Laertes orders them to lay his sister in the earth, and as Hamlet hears it, he figures out that they are talking about Ophelia. The queen now scatters flowers around the grave, and she says that she hoped that Ophelia would become Hamlet's wife. And after that, Laertes leaps into the grave and he curses the one who corrupted Ophelia. To which suddenly Hamlet appears. And he comes closer and he says that his pain is actually the biggest one here, and then he leaps into the grave as well. And to this, Laertes gets obviously very angry and he grabs Hamlet by the throat, and to this Hamlet tells him that he was just not praying well enough. And so now everyone tries to separate them, and finally some people manage to do that, and after that they both come out of the grave. And now Hamlet yells that he loved Ophelia more than Laertes was ever able to, and to this the king whispers that this is just another symptom of madness. And Hamlet yells again that he would do everything for Ophelia, even let himself be buried here alive on top of her grave, while Laertes is only good when it comes to talking, but doesn't actually show anything to prove his words. To which the queen says that this is just some madness and that Hamlet will probably cool down in a minute. And after that, Hamlet leaves and the king tells Horatio to go after him and keep an eye on him. Following that, we change the location and we are now in a hall in the castle, and we have here Hamlet and Horatio. And here Hamlet tells a story about what happened on the ship. As it turns out that one night he sneaked in to where his friends were sleeping, so Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and he found the letter from the king. The letter in which he requested England to kill Hamlet for the greater good of both Denmark and England. So Hamlet decided to forge another letter in which he asked as the king to kill the messengers, so Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. And then he swapped this letter with the another one, and after that, the next day, they had the sea fight with the pirates. And so to this, Horatio concludes that the king is a very bad guy, and Hamlet then says that he's not going to hold back when it comes to taking revenge now. And Horatio says that the king is probably going to get the message from England soon about killing the messengers, and so because of that, Hamlet concludes that he has to hurry now. And so then Osric comes in, and Osric is a servant, and Hamlet checks that, kind of, because Hamlet has this way of checking the servants where he's like, oh, it's so hot today. And so Osric is like, oh, yes, indeed, it's very hot today. And then right after that, Hamlet is like, oh, you know what? Actually, it's so cold today. And Osric is like, oh, yes, indeed, it's so cold today. So he checks Osric like this, and we figure that, you know, Osric doesn't really have a mind of his own. He's just doing what's told. And so after Osric enters, he begins to say how wonderful Laertes is when it comes to the art of rapier combat. And then he adds that the king and Laertes made a bet that Hamlet would lose if he had to fight with Laertes. And so Hamlet is like, well, why not check it out? And he agrees, of course. And he says that Laertes can come anytime he wants and they can fight. And so now Osric leaves, and Horatio tells Hamlet that he believes that he's going to lose. To which Hamlet is like, no, I'm not going to lose because I have been practicing ever since Laertes went back to France, so he should be able to win at the odds. And then Hamlet adds that he feels some sort of heaviness in his chest, like in his heart. But then he adds that those kind of feelings are just some sort of foolery, so he's not going to believe them. To this, Horatio tries to convince him to maybe refuse the combat, but Hamlet says that he's going to die sooner or later, so it might as well happen now. Then people start to enter the scene, and we have here King Claudius, Queen Gertrude, Laertes, and Osric. The king then places Laertes' hand into Hamlet's hand, and after that Hamlet asks Laertes for forgiveness for his words at the graveyard, and he explains that his actions were the result of madness. Laertes accepts the apology, Hamlet thanks him, and then after that they grab the rapiers. And then the king orders servants to prepare cups full of wine, and he then adds that Hamlet is going to get a cup with the most expensive pearl in it if he manages to win. So they begin to fight, and very soon Hamlet stabs Laertes, but very gently because this is like, you know, fencing, so yeah, it's nothing serious. And the king is like, oh, good, Hamlet, good, take a sip of this cup now. But Hamlet is too into the fight right now, and he doesn't really want to drink, so he continues the fight with Laertes, and very soon he stabs him again, to which now the queen gets very happy, and she takes a sip from the cup. To which the king is like, no, oh god, it's too late now. So the fight continues, and now they both miss, but right after that Laertes stabs Hamlet, but then they change rapiers, and then Hamlet stabs Laertes for the third time. Right after that, the queen falls, and she screams that she's been poisoned with the wine. She then dies, and right after that, Laertes falls down, and he admits that the rapiers were poisoned, so they are both going to die very soon. And he also adds that the king is the one that's guilty here. To which Hamlet then stabs the king, who dies right after. And then Laertes concludes that the justice has been served, and then he asks Hamlet for forgiveness, and after that he dies. Now Hamlet forgives him, and he asks Horatio to tell everyone the true story of what happened here. To which Horatio is just like, no way, I'm not doing this, I'm going to drink the rest of the wine and that's going to be it. But Hamlet begs him not to do this because Horatio is now the only person that knows the true story. And then they hear noise coming from afar, they hear march and shots. So like war sounds. And Osric says that this has to be Fortinbras coming back from Poland. To which Hamlet predicts that Fortinbras is going to be chosen as the new king, and then he asks Horatio to explain everything that happened here tonight. Then Hamlet dies, and right after that, Fortinbras enters the scene with the English ambassadors. And Fortinbras is very shocked at this whole scene because, like, everyone from the royal family is dead, and he asks what in the world has happened here. And right after, the ambassadors say that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern were both killed, but now no one can even thank them for that, because, like, everyone is dead. Following that, Horatio asks everyone to listen to the whole story of what happened here tonight, and Fortinbras answers.
Let us haste to hear it, and call the noblest to the audience. For me, with sorrow I embrace my fortune. I have some rights of memory in this kingdom, which now to claim my vantage doth invite me.
To which Horatio says that he also has something to say about Fortinbras taking the throne, but first he wants to tell the whole story about what happened tonight. And then at the very end, Fortinbras orders everyone to treat Hamlet as a hero because he would be a great example for kings. They leave the scene while carrying the dead bodies, then the cannons are fired and the play ends here. So that was the whole story of Hamlet. Did you like it? I don't know, the whole story is just so sad, and I just thought that it would be nice to have it summarized on the internet in this format that I have here going on the channel. Did you like Hamlet? Do you like the format that I have here? You can write me in the comments if you want, but yeah. Well, I guess we can end with saying that almost everyone is dead, and it's only because one guy wanted to become a king and the other guy couldn't revenge his father without months of contemplation. And so this is really everything from me in this video, because I feel like I said everything that I wanted to say. And to be honest, creating those videos is just so much fun to me right now, and forcing myself to say anything more just to make the outro longer would not be fun. And so because of that, we are ending here. This is the end. Bye.